Hard Hat's all about showing up to play hard, doing what it takes to win.
If you want to cement legacy, win another.
He's your third center.
You don't want to pump him up too much, but it's hard not to.
This is maybe the most I've ever agreed with you.
Hey, Bobby Manning here. Sherrod Blakely joining us for the final late edition of the Garden Report after a West Coast game. A couple more left on this trip, but they're earlier start times. And fortunately for the viewers, Sherrod, and whoever among them will not be among us here, you could probably give up on this game early and go to sleep and call it a night.
Yeah, this was one where it kind of got out of hand. And the Celtics, I mean, this is what again, the Celtics, this is, to me, it was a more reflection of just how incredibly deep and built they are to, for this marathon of a season where a lot of teams are, looking at this as if it's a sprint. Main score goes down, doesn't play, questionable to start, is then ruled out, win by 30. This is kind of in many ways reminiscent of what we saw in the Celtics a year ago, where one or two key guys go down and they still beat you by 30. That's kind of been their MO the last couple of years. And it was good to see them have a game like this, especially against a team like Phoenix that had so much to play for and had so much going right for them coming into this game. To really put the smack down on them like this was really good to see if you're the Celtics.
Yeah, you thought this might be the height of the trip, the height of competition here, given what Phoenix was doing coming in, but that wasn't the case. And from the opening 5-6 possessions, even more than that, the open threes they gave to Boston, the Celtics shot threes on 12 of their first 13 shots, I believe.
They knocked down 10 in the first quarter,
8.
I think. Yeah.
10 in the first quarter, 42 points, which was tied for 5th most in a quarter by Boston this year. They gave up 38 the other way, so it actually was pretty competitive early, just back and forth scoring. But after that, they started to separate themselves. And this Phoenix team just looks broken in terms of the defense right now. And when you look at what they did here tonight, not guarding threes early, when they decided to run out to the 3-point line, run the Celtics off the line, Celtics started going right by them. And when you saw Horford attack a closeout and go right by a guy and dunk, that's when you were like, ooh, this
that was over. Atlanta Hawks Horford right there. And even that Al didn't really do it that often. It seemed that he could have done that whenever he wanted to in this game.
Yeah. And Al went to the free throw line in this one, which never happens.
Never happens, right. Yeah.
So this is a disaster for Phoenix defensively. But if that's the kind of defense you're going to go up against, you want to be able to hit every shot. You want to be able to take advantage of the opportunities you get there. And when you look at the Celtics at the end of this one, 50% from the field, 42% from three, 22 free throws. They hit 90% of them, and 11 offensive rebounds. So they grabbed pretty much every shot they missed out there. This was, again, consider the defense you're going against. But on the other hand, you're missing Jason Tatum, and this was about as seamless of an offensive performance as I've seen from the Celtics all year. They were just rolling and never really stopped.
Yeah, and the thing about it, at the end of the day, no matter how crappy a team may be defensively, you still got to make those shots. You still got to make them pay for, just the pitiful, putrid play that they're exhibiting defensively. And not all teams do that.
So bad.
So the Celtics, I mean, they did exactly what you're supposed to do. Exactly what you're supposed to do.
Yeah, and I think they cost the same as the Celtics. I think they actually cost a little bit more, the Suns team. And you saw Bradley Beal on the sideline. You saw Kevin Durant doing his thing, but it not really mattering much. And that was something too, Sherrod, in this one. He hit like 8 of his first 11 at Durant and pretty much got whatever he wanted early in this game. Led the Suns through that first quarter where they dropped 38. But I looked at it and I'm like, all right, Celtics have shot 15 threes. Suns have shot like 6 or 7. Brown's hitting his first 2 threes. Everybody's hitting threes on the Celtics. Durant's mostly hitting those 10-footers.
Yeah.
So he was rolling. You never felt that it was actually going to hurt the Celtics the way that the math was adding up there.
Yeah, I mean, it was 3 for 2, going back and forth. And so, he'd make a shot, great, and then they're down by another point the other way. This was, again, first, Durant, reminded, I think, all of us how amazingly incredible and cheat code like he is even now.
Yeah.
He's not nearly at the level he was in terms of peak Kevin Durant, and yet he's still pretty damn dominant. Jaylen Brown had issues. Drew Holiday had issues. Whoever was trying to defend him could not do it. And the stuff that he was doing was exactly what a 7-foot sniper will do. If he's got the ball on the elbow or he's got it, mid-range, and he's looking at a guy that's 6'4", 6'6", guarding him, don't mess around. Just raise up and shoot over the top of him. He had at least 2 or 3 shots where that's literally all he did. Just looked at who was guarding him and just raised up. Enough you can do about that if you're Drew Holiday. Enough you can do about that if you're Durant. But other end of the floor, make them pay defensively. Knowing how bad they are at that end of the floor, this was painful to watch. Because you're just hoping that they'd put up a little bit of resistance, considering how important this game was to them and how important these last few games are. I think they have like the second toughest schedule in the NBA the rest of the way. And if this is anything close to what's in store for them, they're going to do the same thing that you and me and a lot of NBA players are going to do come time, and that's be spectators, watch the game. And that's, they have a golden opportunity to play their way into the postseason, at least into the play-in. And I just don't think they're good enough to do it. It's not about will or want to. I just don't think they're good enough to play well enough, particularly at the defensive end, to give themselves a shot of being in the postseason.
I do want to talk about Durant and their future in a little bit. We talked about it with Dwayne Rankin on here yesterday, and I caught a lot of crap for our conversation we had, so I'll address that in a little bit here.
Well, I'll be talking to Dwayne this weekend, so bring it on.
The conversation we had didn't go over well with the viewers here on the Garden Report, so we'll circle back on that in a little bit. But it is March, and the March bracket continues over here on the Garden Report, and we have a good one going on right now over in the chat, as well as on the Celtics on CLNS Twitter account. And I believe the one we're looking at right here, and I'm about to make my vote live here, in the third center region, that's Jealous, number 3. That's a John one. And the Tatum Lullaby, which we won't be hearing tonight after Jason Tatum missed the game here. I'm going to go Tatum Lullaby. And looks like a lot of you are right now, too.
Yeah.
Over there. So go check that out. Go vote. We have the third center region up here tonight. So a couple of those going on. We'll circle back to the other one in a little bit here. But you can go vote live, open right now. And third center region. Do we have a potential champion on this side? We got That's Jealous. We got Tatum Lullaby. We got Laxica Days Ago, which I remember. That's a Jimmy one, Sherrod, unsurprisingly. Yeah. And we have the Noah Hates Tatum, which is going to be.
I don't think that one's going to go very far. I'm your muted might be a sleeper. I think that could maybe kind of sneak its way in out of the third center region. I like that one a lot, actually.
Yep. So go over there and vote. We'll circle back on some of the results there later with Noah, who I guess can explain her hatred of Tatum when she comes back from Phoenix. She's out in Phoenix tonight, so we'll talk to her in a little bit. Jason Tatum. I guess we should talk about him right now while we have his name up here. Participate and shoot around unimaginably, Sherrod. I can't believe after what we saw in Sacramento that he went through shoot around this morning, was doing his, high knees and all the other stuff with his trainer, Nick Sang there, and got upgraded from doubtful to questionable going into this game, and went through a little walkthrough before the game, was out on the court pretty close to tip off. And then they finally ruled him out. Because I think myself and others looked at it and said, how in the world 48 hours after what we saw, the pain and the writhing he went through in a game that means relatively little for the Celtics here, are you going to go out and try to come back 48 hours after suffering that injury? I'm glad, whether it was the Celtics or he came to his senses a little bit last second there and was like, all right, let's give it a couple more days here. I'm obviously, with the result here, thrilled that he did not play in this one. But you should also be thrilled that that was even possible, that was even in the cards. I mean, that would have been unimaginable 2 days ago if someone said that.
Yeah, but that it's very on brand for Jason Tatum. I mean, he's made it very clear time and time again he does not like missing games, does not want to miss games, especially road games. Where he's been very clear that he understands his role in the NBA ecosystem. He knows that his fan base is global. In every city they go in, there are people who are coming to that game specifically to see him. And Jason, he feels he doesn't want to let them down, but at the same time, these are the moments when you have to remind yourself that you got a responsibility to your teammates, a responsibility to this organization. And part of that responsibility is making sure that you are as close to being ready to roll when the games matter most, and that's the playoffs. And if there's something that could potentially jeopardize that before you get to the playoffs, when you're this close to the playoffs, you need to err on the side of caution. Like you, Bobby, I was very surprised that it was even a possibility that he would play that close to the game. I just assumed that after the injury happened, the next day, they take a closer look at it and realize, okay, this is not as long-term an injury as we thought it might be. Let's just take that Phoenix game off just to give him a little extra time, especially knowing that they don't play again until the weekend. So you got even more baked in time to let that ankle heal up as much as it possibly can. So the fact that he has taken a little bit more time with this and didn't play is not surprising. Like you, Bobby, unexpected to see that he was potentially able to play in this game. That would have been, to me, it would have just been, frankly, you're tempting fate in a way you should not be tempting fate this time of year. And so, everything obviously has worked out for the better. They got the big win. Other guys got a chance to get some run, and Tatum got a few more days to rest that ankle so that, again, he'll be as close to being ready to roll come playoff time as he can be.
Yeah. And obviously if he was going to play here, you would think the team would have a sense that it wouldn't be dangerous to do so. So again, I'm curious to see whether, they held him out, whether he said, all right, I need a couple more days here, because they do have 2 more days off after this before the San Antonio game on Saturday. And you can see how it reacts to the flight and all that. The thing you have to say is that with no boot, with him keeping the shoes on, the report said, at the locker room there that night, that the swelling couldn't have been too terrible initially. And obviously the swelling was in a place today where he could actually go out and move around and do some stuff, dribbling side to side. I saw some videos of that out of Phoenix tonight. And again, I don't think there's any rush to get him back. But when we were sitting here 2 nights ago, Sherrod, talking about him potentially missing the rest of the regular season here, which I think was in the cards based on how it looked, and sometimes ankles being 2 to 3 weeks, even for a relatively minor one. The fact that we're again talking about potentially Saturday, him coming back here optimistically is such a huge relief here, because the biggest, when we talked about it the other night, Sherrod, the biggest bummer seeing that happen in real time wasn't, oh, he's going to miss a ton of time here, it's going to hurt the team. It was that he was rolling at such a high level in that game and in the weeks prior. I think he was playing his best basketball of the season right up until that point. And if this was going to knock him off that at all, or interrupt his rhythm, or just force him to work his way back to that point going into the playoffs, that would have been the bigger impact than him missing a couple of games down the stretch here, even missing some time in the first round, which, as we've seen here, they can get by without him for some amount of time. You just want him playing at the level we saw when it really matters in the playoffs into round 2 and beyond.
Yeah. And when guys have these type of ankle injuries, and it's to a part of the body that they've aggravated before, you never really know how that's going to react, because often it's usually an extreme reaction where they'll heal quicker than you probably think they should, because their body is used to that type of pain, and they have a different kind of threshold for that, or it's going to take longer just because they have had this happen before and they're going to be super duper overly cautious about it. And it seems that the injury wasn't quite as severe as we thought it would be, and I think because Tatum has had ankle soreness before. He knows his body well enough to know how to navigate beyond the injury and knows when his body's ready to come back out there and compete. And he clearly was feeling good enough to where it was even a possibility for him to play in this game at some point. And like I said earlier, I'm just glad that someone was in the room when those decisions were made who just said him playing tonight is not a good idea. Let's give this a little bit more time. Whether it's Jason, whether it was the medical staff, I don't care. I'm just glad they made that decision.
Definitely. And with that, we'll give a quick shout out to one of our sponsors here. And I saw a lot of Celtics fans in the crowd tonight, Sherrod. I knew there would be out there in Phoenix. So I hope they use Game Time. And if you're in San Antonio, if you're in Memphis, I hope you use Game Time to go to the game as well. There'll be plenty of seats available in both those arenas, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Given the way both their seasons are going at this point, Memphis slipping a little bit, San Antonio, Victor and Fox are both out for the season. So you'll get some great deals to go see the Celtics on the road. And that's been the hack I think a lot of Celtics fans have done this season is just go see them on the road. The Garden ticket's tough to come by after a championship and the way they've rolled this year. So go see them in San Antonio if you're in that Texas area. And if you're in Memphis, go check them out there on Monday with the Game Time app. The best way to go get tickets for concerts, events, baseball coming up. I bought a couple of Red Sox tickets for next weekend, the home opening series over on Game Time. And that's where the panoramic view of your seats comes in handy here because you got all those poles at Fenway, Sherrod. You don't know if you're going to be sitting behind them and not be able to even see home plate. Right. That's a great feature on Game Time is you can see if you're in one of those seats or see if you're near one and you don't like your view, you can go check out a different view over there. So use the code CLNS to get $20 off your first purchase over there. Terms apply. Use the code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase over on the Game Time app. Again, concerts, baseball, hockey playoffs starting soon, and basketball playoffs right around the corner as well. Celtics coming home next week too, so you can check them out here in Boston against the Heat right after that Grizzlies game early next week. So road trip continues here. We all want to see Jaylen Brown turn it around after last game, a 9-point performance against the Kings there, where he just didn't look super involved, Sherrod. Obviously, Tatum dealing with the ankle here. Jaylen dealing with the knee, bone bruise that forced him to miss 4 out of 5 going into that game. A surprisingly fast return for him coming into that one, too, that made you go, all right, is this really necessary? Especially when he came out and just looked completely uninvolved, out of rhythm, turned the ball over a bunch, a couple of travels in that game. And it's so rare to see a guy like that score 9 points and take 8 shots or whatever he did in that game. So he comes out in this one, hits 2 quick threes. He hadn't been hitting threes leading up to that point in his last 4, 5, 6 games coming into it. So that was a good sign. And then I thought he was in good control throughout this game, focused on getting Porziņģis the ball where he needed it, and we'll get to Porzingis in a little bit here as well, and picked his spots. And I thought it was a good matchup for him to find his rhythm here because as he does, he'll go after the weakest link on the floor over and over again. And the Suns started calling Gillespie, who was a prime target for Jaylen to attack all night long and score an efficient 24 points here.
Yeah, and this was blueprint of Jaylen Brown's success when he's working his way back into getting to where he wants to be. Just figure out a mismatch, find a mismatch, exploit the mismatch, rinse, recycle, repeat. That's kind of what he does. And Gillespie was that guy. I mean, he was a guy that, Jaylen, whenever he got the ball in that particular matchup, absolutely went to work as he should have. Jaylen, again, I'm not worried about him in terms of effort or intensity. I'm worried about him in terms of health. This is really the first year that, since he's been a Celtic, where I am a little bit concerned about his health, not being available, but just being effective and impactful. Being healthy enough to where he can do the things that Jaylen Brown is accustomed to doing come playoff time. He's had a couple of different stretches this season where he's had kind of, bumps and bruises and soreness that have either limited him or have kept him off the floor. And I do worry about that come playoff time because I do believe that his availability is going to be one of his greatest abilities when it comes to the Celtics repeating as champions.
Yeah, for sure. And this is another one. Is it too fast here? Who's making the call there where he comes back for that Miami game or misses the Miami game on the front end of a back-to-back, comes back for the Brooklyn game the next night, gets hurt again, has some back spasm thing going on there, and then has to sit out the next handful of games with a knee again. So it's obviously multiple things ailing him through the schedule here, Sherrod. And I think, we've heard that and seen that with the amount of games he's missed here throughout the schedule where, it's shoulder, for a little stretch. It's knee at one point. I know the hips bothering him at one point there. And so all this stuff compounding, all this stuff you see bothering him in real time in a game like the Thunder a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, there's so little to play for right now. There's so much time until the playoffs. Do you need a rush back? Do you need a push back? And is it harmful, to be doing that? Is it going to be something you just struggle through to, I guess, try to stay available or, push for that all NBA? And he did need to play in 8 of the final 10 there to be eligible for that. And I had a lot of concerns about why he was pushing back and, is it worth it when he came back, especially looking that way against the Kings the other night.
Mm-hmm.
But fortunately tonight, I never really saw him look limited. And then when he threw down that big dunk off the dribble there as part of that 5-point sequence that someone said there, that's when I was like, whew, all right, he looks good. He looks fine.
Yeah.
He looks uninhibited by whatever's going on here. Now, does that change coming out of this game? Does that change night to night depending on where he's at on any given day? The good news is you can still rest him in 2 games down the stretch and have him available for that award. And the award the rules actually say, Sherrod, because there's like 2 Charlotte games at the end of the year that obviously will be like full rest nights for the team as they were last year. He could play like 15 minutes in those games and just check out and have those count under the new rules here.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that the Celtics will start doing some of that because, like, tonight he played 28 minutes, and obviously, it got out of hand, and that was part of why, he didn't play major minutes. But I would love to see Jaylen for the rest of the season till we get to the playoffs play less than 30 minutes. Give that to me. That gives him enough time to just get into a flow, get into a rhythm, keep that flow going, but not put too much, physical stress on his body. At this point of the year, it really isn't about winning and losing games as much as it is about making sure that you can preserve your best players for the playoffs. And
right, and there's a balance between resting, holding guys out, and making sure they're conditioned and ready to play 40 minutes too. So that's always a hard one to balance, I'm sure, for these teams.
Yeah, it is. And it is a challenge. And I absolutely get that. But you really do need to make an intentional effort to keep Tatum, to keep Brown, to keep Porzingis and Jrue Holiday and those guys, keep those minutes under the 30 minutes per game cap. Just, it may seem like only a couple minutes here and there, but over the course of the rest of the season, if you want to play those guys most, if not all nights, you're probably going to save them by cutting it down to 25 minutes as opposed to 32 or 33. You're going to save them a full game's worth of wear and tear by the time you get to the end of the season. And every minute, every game matters that you can preserve them health-wise so that they can be at their peak performance or at least close to their peak performance when we get to the playoffs.
Yeah, definitely. And again, the way he looked tonight, the burst he had, and that's a big thing too. And I know he's talked about that a couple times this year, is having that burst, using his explosiveness. That Thunder game, it looked like he couldn't. And there's been times this year where it didn't look like he had that extra separation on the drive, the elevation and strength to finish through contact around the rim. I think all the lower body stuff he's dealt with this year has limited him at times from being able to do that stuff. So the dunk tonight, especially in the separation he created, not that it was that hard to separate from these defenders tonight, Sherrod, made me encouraged about where he's going. And what's encouraging too coming out of this one, just how well they play. And I've been looking at the numbers all year because I think it was last year or 2 years ago, you had a lot of concerns about, all right, when Tatum's off the floor and Brown's running the show, you're dropping off so much there, and you don't know if you can survive those minutes, and you're always rushing to get Tatum back in the game. I bet after tonight, where you win by 1 million, Your numbers might actually be better with Brown on the court alone than Tatum on the court alone this year when you're talking about those two different lineups. It was close coming in, so after a plus 24 night for Jaylen, in this one, I'd have to imagine that they're actually better with Jaylen on the floor alone, which says a lot about his growth and his playmaking and how far his offensive game has come.
It does, but at the same time, it goes against the eye test because the eye test tells you that
There's
have
still
been
times where you're like, ooh.
Yeah, they look more consistently elite when Tatum is out there by himself versus when Brown is out there, kind of leading the charge. And that's, again, we've had plenty of instances, not only with this year's team, but just in the grand scheme of things, where the numbers don't necessarily align themselves with the eye test. Things look a certain way when you're watching the game play and you're watching certain combinations. Then you look at the data and it doesn't look quite as good, or it looks way better than you would think. Sam Hauser is never going to get a vote for Defensive Player of the Year, and yet you look at his numbers; they're very good in terms of relative to other guys. In terms of matching up with folks. So, we need to be careful when it comes to the data. Because sometimes the data will lie to you. But to your point, Bobby, I do think that Jaylen is having more and more moments where when he's being called upon to lead without Tatum, he does a good job. He's getting better at that. But we also have to be mindful that Tatum doesn't miss a bunch of games. So the Jaylen Brown sample is smaller. And because it's smaller, you don't really have as true a feel for what this team is like when he's leading the show with no Tatum versus how it looks when Tatum's leading the team with no Brown. Because Tatum's still in that role whether Brown is there or not. So there really isn't an adjustment for him other than just his plate gets maybe a little bit heavier. But as your best player, that's kind of how it's supposed to be most nights anyway. So the numbers certainly will indicate I think this thing is really close, maybe even in favor of Jaylen. But the eye test tells us different.
So is he in play to make All NBA right now? Because that's obviously a significant part of his availability down the stretch. I'd have to say the incentive for him to go out and play 7 of these last 9 games is to remain eligible for that award. And I think it's close right now when you look at how it stacks up. And Tatum, again, fortunately, already reached that threshold, and he's such a lock for first team All-NBA that he doesn't have to do anything down the stretch to earn it. You're looking at a first team that's pretty much locked at Jokic, Shea, Giannis, Tatum, Mitchell. Cade, your guy there in Detroit, Sherrod, making a little bit of an inroad for a first team, which is out of this world. Edwards is going to be in the mix for that second team. Brunson, although, he's dealing with an injury right now that's probably going to put that up in the air a little bit. LeBron, with the numbers he's put up this year, probably in play for a second or third team, although he's been hurt as well a little bit. Evan Mobley, who's probably going to win Defensive Player of the Year, Jaren Jackson are probably in this mix as well. Right. So, these spots start to fill up pretty quickly here. And the chat was mentioning, Durant, you look at the numbers he has, Curry, Towns is a lock, with New York here. And I feel like this is going to come down to Jaylen Brown with the Celtics or Jalen Williams with the Thunder.
Yeah. I think that for that last 1 or 2 spots, I do think that Jaylen Brown is going to be on that short list of, possible ends or just out on the outside looking in. And you're
Devin
right.
Booker.
I think this, what's that?
Devin Booker too, 25, 4 and 7 for him.
It's going to be tight. The one thing we do know with absolute certainty, and that is that Jaylen Brown will be in that conversation. But whether he's in, whether he's out, I just think this last month of the season is going to dictate that. Because I just think it's too close to call one way or the other right now. And the fact that Jaylen again has missed some games with a few bumps and bruises, it doesn't help the matter. He is in that what I call the out of sight, out of mind bracket, where if he's playing, you're thinking about him as a possibility of being on one of those last teams. If he's not playing, then he, in the eyes, I think, of a lot of people, it's easy to discard him from that conversation because there's so many other deserving players who are just as deserving as he is. What if they're playing and he's not? That I think in the eyes of some people is going to be what puts a Devin Booker, for example, in play versus having Jaylen. And conversely, if he is playing and maybe one or two of those guys are being held out or something is going on with them, that could be to his benefit. But if they decide to shut him down or limit his minutes, it absolutely will have an effect on his All-NBA status. So that, to me, is one of those things where the Celtics, they really have to kind of figure out how that's going to manifest itself and how it's going to play out. And certainly these are the kind of games that make it easier. When you beat the crap out of your opponent, you play him limited minutes, and he still puts up good numbers. I mean, 24, 5, and 3 with only one turnover in 28 minutes, and you're plus 24. Yeah, that's a win-win-win all the way around. He gets good numbers. Team gets the victory. His body doesn't have the kind of wear and tear that it's accustomed to this time of year.
Yeah, it's not looking great for him numbers-wise right now, and he's scoring a little bit more than Jalen Williams, but the 43% field goal, or the 45 rather, and the 31% three-pointer probably holding him back a little bit right now in that conversation. It's going to take some big-time performances. This is a good start here. And as you mentioned, other guys falling out of the race for potentially not playing here. You're thinking of Damian Lillard, who is probably going to miss the rest of the regular season at least. And we'll get to that news, which is a pretty massive one in the East right now later in the show. Other names, dealing with injuries throughout the East here. So he's in a conversation, but he's probably on the outside looking in right now. Tyler Hero, great season for him as well. 23 a game on 50. There's a lot of names at that last spot there. And, when you start thinking of all the big men that could be in the mix there too, between a Mobley and a Jackson and all that, Jaylen might just end up one spot outside of this thing again, which is where he was last year. And, he doesn't need it for the money at this point, Sherrod. But, when you look back at a guy's career, you start to stack up. How many All-NBAs do you have? That's like one of the first things you look at alongside championships. And, you probably even look at that ahead of All-Stars.
Yeah. And Jaylen, we don't talk a lot about it, but Jaylen is really slowly but surely putting together a fairly impressive legacy of his basketball career that, like every player is at some point, it's just going to stop. You're just not going to be that guy anymore. So opportunities to be acknowledged for your greatness, for what you've done for the game, how you have been one of the best players. You're absolutely looking to stack those up as often as you possibly can. And Jaylen, no one is going to remember in 10 years whether he was like the next best player to not be named to an All-NBA team. No one cares about that. You're either on that team or you're not. And so,
yeah, you can't name one guy who's the next guy off in any given year.
Yeah, no, you can't. And that's why these things are important and why they do matter. And so, yeah, Jaylen, I think there's a part of him that wants to play not only to help this team win down a stretcher, but also to better position himself for those type of accolades and acknowledgement.
How long do you want me to keep this up for? 5 seconds? We'll keep it up there for a long time for you, Judah. Let's tell the people about Prize Picks. Then we get some sound coming out of Phoenix. Prize Picks, it's a good time of year. You got these great basketball games going on across the board into the postseason right now. And it's the best time to go over there and check out all the players across all sports, because on Prize Picks, you can combine, you can mix and match players and their projections from baseball with basketball or basketball with hockey. You're going to have playoff games going on both sports right now. So if you like a hockey players more or less on their goals, and you like let's say Jaylen Brown more on his scoring on any given night, you can group those together over there on Prize Picks. It's one of many great features over there to run your game. And again, play with your friends, think you have a take, they have a take, you can go head to head over there. And that's what makes it so fun. It's the most accessible way to play daily fantasy. And if you use the code CLNS, play $5, you'll get $50 instantly over on Prize Picks. And again, when you got the playoffs coming up, it's one of the best times. You got baseball starting this week. A lot of great opportunities to go over there and pick more or less. And it's that simple. And that's why it's so accessible. And you can win up to 1,000 times your money over on Prize Picks by just picking more or less. Strikeouts, RBIs, first inning runs. Baseball starts tomorrow, Sherrod. I'm pumped. I'm looking forward to the Red Sox this year. And again, Prize Picks just makes it a little more fun. And again, if you head over there and use the code CLNS, get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. Again, get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup over on Prize Picks. Again, second half of the basketball season as well. Prize Picks, the best place to cash in on your favorite sports. Use that code CLNS to let them know we sent you. Prize Picks, run your game. Let's hear from Joe out there in Phoenix. See what he had to say about this one.
Still there. 15 shots in that first quarter and 21 the rest of the game. What stood out to you about how you kind of made things more difficult?
For who?
The Suns.
They had, what was it?
They made 15 shots in the first quarter.
Oh.
And I think 21
for the rest of the game?
Unless I can't add.
I didn't know that. I just liked our defensive approach. I thought the guys were able to take it to another level. I thought it was a shootout in the beginning of the game, and we had some cross-match breakdowns. They had a few offensive rebounds, and then I thought we just really dialed it in. And I thought our shift activity was really good. They're one of the best corner three-point shooting teams in the league. We were able to take that away and kind of just keep everybody in front, keep it 5-on-5. So I thought the guys did a great job of that.
Building off the defense, only 14 points for Devin Booker tonight on 4-13 shooting. What did you like about your execution on him?
I thought he missed some easy ones. At the end of the second quarter, we got nobody guarded him. When he walked down and shot a three, he just missed it. But for the most part, I thought he missed a couple of ones, but we were physical. We were physical with him. Like I said, we were shifted. I thought we did a good job just creating gray areas. I didn't know if we were in shifts or if we were inching out to guys, and we were just active. And everybody that checked in the game tonight competed at a high level defensively.
A lot of people focus on the offensive side of KP, just the long-range shooting, but quite a few low-man help possessions tonight. Just what do you see from him on that end? Yeah,
like I said, I thought at the point of attack, our guards were great in pick and roll. I thought Drew and JB's physicality with Durant were good. I thought Peyton and Sam and those guys were great in pick and roll, and Derek. But the combination of Al, Luke, KP, those three guys playing together, we were able to kind of really shift and protect the paint and take a lot of their stuff away. And KP kind of spearheaded that, with his rim protection.
Jaylen hasn't missed a ton of games over the years. He's pretty durable, but he's obviously dealt with his knee thing this month. How have you seen him just approach that? And just tonight, what did you see out of him?
Yeah, I thought it was great. I thought he kind of found his groove a little bit, especially in that third quarter. But he's just a guy that whatever he has to do to put himself in the best chance to be at his best for us and to help us win, he does. And so right now, for a couple games, it was taking care of his knee, and now it's doing what he needs to do. Thought he was really efficient, 7 for 15, 4 for 9, 6 for 6 from the line, but his defense was great. His presence was great for us.
Hey, Coach. DJ Chida, Burn City Sports. A lot of Let's Go Celtics chants way out here in Phoenix. Are you used to the team traveling?
Better pull the plug, Bobby. You're muted, Bobby.
Yeah, we know the road fans love the Celtics out there.
Yeah.
Big news, though, as we listen to Joe there. The third center region. Tatum lullaby.
Yep.
Rolling on.
No
59-40 over that's jealous. So we'll hear from Noah on her hate of Tatum here as we look at the board again, because I think they're next up over there against Lackadaisical. I actually think that one's going to be pretty close because that's a Jimmy special, Sherrod.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how to say Lackadaisical.
Yeah. That's going to be really close. That's going to be really close. I'm probably going to go with Lackadaisical though. I think they'll edge it out. Lackadaisical is how you say it. Yeah. I am not going to work on mispronouncing a word. That is such a Jimmy homeschool moment right there. So I'm just going to leave that to Jimmy. That's his specialty. I'm assuming Jimmy's not watching, but we'll root for him in this one. And again, go over there and vote in the chat, and as well as Celtics on CLNS on Twitter there has these polls up now as well. So continuing forward, Sherrod, we'll circle back to the game with Noah in a little bit here. Porzingis was great. I think he just keeps rolling.
every single night he's back here. The performances and the consistency from him just ridiculous in this one. He was able to pick on so many mismatches here in this one that he never stopped rolling in this game. And even when he missed, he pretty much just went up and grabbed his own board. 30 points with ease in this one in 3 quarters. He didn't play in the fourth. He's in a great place right now. And the fact that he keeps saying he could get even more conditioned and he could get even better here going forward into the playoffs. He's another guy you're looking at here and being like, all right, let's be careful with the minutes and the rest and all the different things you want to see, get him to the finish line healthy. But he's been pretty durable this year, following the surgery and a few bumps and bruises after that. It was just that illness he went through that really knocked him out of a ton of games recently. And the fact that it hasn't bothered him at all here and he's doing this kind of stuff is kind of absurd.
Well, the thing about KP that really has stood out to me, not just this year, but just in a very broad general sense, is how he's one of the few players that can miss a certain amount of time, return to action, and pick up wherever he was before he stopped playing.
I don't know how he does it.
I don't either. I mean, it's, usually it takes guys a little bit of time to kind of ramp up and get back to where they were before they suffered an injury. He doesn't have that issue. He is able to find those mismatches offensively, whether he has played 7 consecutive games or whether he's missed 7 consecutive games and is now back. He's been able to do that very, very consistently. And defensively, his presence is no weaker or stronger, when he's played 3 or 4 consecutive games versus missing 3 or 4 consecutive games and then returning. And that, for me, is why, to your point, Bobby, it's so important that you make sure that he's good to go come playoff time, because you have a pretty good idea that he's going to make an impact, a significant one in some way, shape, or form if he's out there. That's really been kind of the one thing that has been very steady when you talk about the Kristaps Porzingis experience in Boston. His ability to make an impact regardless of how much, lead up time he has to a game.
Yeah, definitely. And the efficiency just is absurd. It wasn't 1 of 15, as the chat points out there. It was 10 of 15 tonight. So Porzingis took care of business. I thought, looking across the box score here, I think everybody pretty much chipped in. Al, throwback performance with the 16, 10, and 5. We'll give him a shout out. Why not? When Al has a night like this, we gotta give him some love here. He was energized, active, going downhill. You know what I've noticed too, Sherrod, is they start him in Tatum's place next to Porzingis. They're going to him in the post a little bit more to have him pass out of there or attack some mismatches or just allow Porzingis to be on the perimeter a little more, because obviously Porzingis is going to fill that role when he's the only big out there. But just to get the movement going, I think, a little bit and get Al in a more active position. They've played Al inside more with Porzingis above the 3-point line the last couple of times that they've played together.
And I just think Al's more impactful when they're giving him the ball in that spot. I mean, the way that they're utilizing Al a little bit more now, as far as the role, is very similar to what Al's role was when he was in Atlanta and he was a perennial all-star every year. He has the ability to score from the elbow. He can pass out of the elbow. He also has the ability to knock down threes, clearly. When given the ball on a block, he can get to the line. Is always going to be a good rebounder, always going to be a good facilitator. And so there's a lot to like about this team when Al has the ability to, again, get the ball in positions that he's very familiar with. And to me, it only adds another level of diversity to what the Celtics are able to do on a night in, night out basis. They're more than just a jack and 3-point shot type team. They can actually do some things working, from the elbow, from the block, and create scoring opportunities around the basket, create better looks outside of, the 3-point line, finding guys like Drew Holiday, in relatively open or lightly contested spots in the corner, Sam Hauser. You go down the line, and Al has the ability to impact the game, very similar to what we saw in Atlanta when he was the face of that franchise.
Yeah, he took advantage of a ton of mismatches in this one. They were everywhere. And again, the fact, not to knock Horford, but, driving by guys, posting up guys, the more physically imposing parts of the offensive game aren't his strengths anymore, but he gets to the free throw line twice in this one. He is blown by a guy for a dunk. that was all surprising to see here. And I think it was pretty emblematic of just how much points for the taking there was against the Phoenix, the way they played defense in this one. It was pretty. I would really rank it up there, Sherrod, among one of the worst defensive performances I've seen by a team against the Celtics in my years covering the team here. This was despicable.
It was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. But I mean, there's, I gotta believe that there have been some pretty putrid moments before this one. But this was a stinker. There's no question about it. This.
And again, they were playing well coming in. I don't know what happened here.
I don't either. And the thing about it was that, if you really look at what the Celtics did, the Celtics played a good game, but it wasn't as if this was like the Celtics playing at their peak or near their peak. I mean, they played a solid game. I didn't think the Celtics were doing anything uniquely special to create opportunities to score, or they were doing some, extraordinary things defensively. I just think that defensively they were solid. Offensively, they were executed consistently, and that just opened things up for them to be successful and win the game. But to beat a team by 30 on their home floor, you're going to need some help from that home team to do that.
Yeah.
And
this thing was over early.
Yeah,
it really was.
The Celtics are one of those teams where they don't need your help and their offense does not need your help to get going.
It was a special approach early where they're like, we're going against the Boston Celtics. We're just not going to guard the 3-point line.
No.
Every single three the Celtics took early was wide open.
Yeah, and the thing about it, and not only were they wide open, but the ball was finding its way into the hands of people who not only know how to knock down those shots, but they were in their sweet spots. I don't even know if we were halfway through the first quarter when every single Celtic starter had a 3-pointer made already. That's not normal. That is not normal basketball. You, as good as you may be as an offensive team, you're going to need help to get that kind of diversity scoring wise, where everyone on the floor who's a starter is knocking down threes. That just does not happen because you're in a rhythm. It happens because you're getting a little bit of help from that opponent who's clearly not playing much defense.
They're not on a string right now, and it's a chemistry thing. It's a belief thing, I think, out there. And, I'm sure we're seeing the end of that short-lived Durant era too out there ahead of this postseason. And if they can't make the play-in with Dallas in the health situation that they're in that fight for the 10 seed right now, I mean, I don't think you're going to see Budenholzer back. I don't think you're going to see Durant back. There's going to be some big changes there. And, I don't think step into the play-in will help all that much if they just lose right away either. So they're in Boston next Friday, so the Celtics are going to see them again in short order. We'll circle back to some of the stuff on this game and the Durant stuff a little later. I know you're talking to Dwayne later this week, Sherrod, so maybe we'll save a little bit of that Suns talk, but there was some big news, continued news in this ownership thing. And I know you've probably been talking about it a little bit on your podcast, Sherrod, and just checking in on some things and keeping tabs on the story. It just gets weirder and weirder every day. Like, we just learned something new that's like, huh? And, he did that interview in Sacramento with NBC Sports Boston. And, he's really selling himself as a fan, and all this reports and stories coming out about how, local guy, big, fan and growing up, and really excited about this team. And his wife's there talking about how much she loves Brad and Joe and all that. And right. I think it's all pretty believable. But the big questions were, what's the money situation here for him specifically? Because it's hard to get a read on what kind of money he's putting specifically into this thing when there's all this money coming in around him. And that big 6th Street investor was really the one that stood out, the private equity firm there that was part of this deal. And so Axios comes around today, and this is Dan Primack over there, and says, there's this rule in the NBA, when you're buying a team, that the most money involved in the deal has to come from that principal owner in Chisholm there. Like, if he's going to be the, face of the franchise, the principal owner of the team, he's got to have the most money going into this thing. And, with Wick, obviously he didn't have the most money, but it was a whole Grossbeck family thing where they're the majority owners. And so the problem here is that Sixth Street right now, according to this Axios report, is the most money. Sixth Street Partners, which is a private equity firm, according to 3 sources, which is not allowed by the NBA per regulations first established in 2021. Instead, a private equity fund can have the lesser of 20% or below the percentage held by the controlling owner, who must hold 15% at the very least. So the problem here is that the private equity firm is a bigger share than Chisholm, according to this report. So the 2 options that they have here, number 1 is get some other people involved, water down that Sixth Street percentage a little bit to the point where, Bill's the, bigger number there than the firm. And the second one is that the NBA just says, all right, we'll let it slide. $6 billion record price here.
We're good.
Bumps up the value of these expansion franchises coming. And, we'll just roll along here. So I think it's going to work out. I can't see a situation here. And I know Pegs had that statement that, we're waiting if things fall apart here. If things don't go well, we might swoop in and buy the team still. I don't think that's going to happen here. But the concern is Chisholm might not have the money that you would have thought an owner coming in with $6 billion being the price tag would have here. And that obviously leads to a lot of questions this summer about what this ownership group is going to demand happens here. And we did hear from Brad Stevens out there in Phoenix, and we'll get to him when Noah comes on. And, we'll listen to a little bit before she comes on too, what Brad had to say out there today about this sale. But where are you at on this thing, Sherrod, especially with the new information we learned today?
Well, excited that, they have an owner in principle, at least, who is excited about being the owner of the Celtics. I think when we first, heard that, the team was being sold to a guy in California, you're like, oh God, that's probably not going to be great. But then you realize the connections you have with the organization in terms of being a fan. Good to hear. This news is they kind of a splash of cold water on all that in some respects, because it does raise questions about how patient this new ownership group is going to be with not making money. Because right now, the way this team is structured, the good news is that they're built to be a title contender for a number of years, but they're not going to be able to keep the band together and start, making a significant profit. And so how patient will this
That's how this private equity stuff works. They're not in it to pour in money and not get anything back.
Exactly. And that's and to me, if he's not, the one that's driving that economic train and someone else is, then how is this really going to work long term? I mean, are you going to see the concern that I think most Celtics fans have, and it's a legitimate one, is that there will be a fire sale and that they will be trying to unload pretty much anyone not named Jason Tatum to the highest bidder. And, there's some very real concerns about that. And this doesn't help that. In fact, this only amplifies those concerns going forward. So I'm hoping that they will address this. And by they, I mean Chisholm and his group will address this in a significantly meaningful, transparent manner sooner rather than later, so that Celtics fans, won't be, going into the playoffs concerned that this might be the last go around for these guys, because the new ownership group is going to come in and potentially take a wrecking ball to this roster to make it more, from a financial standpoint, feasible for them to make a profit.
Yeah, and we'll save all the business stuff here and all the logistics, but what it comes down to is they're going to have to cut this payroll this summer, and I think fans are starting to realize that, and everyone's debating, who should go, who should stay here, and I think you get to that conversation later. I think there's a lot of different ways that could go, just depending on what the market is and how they do in the playoffs and how all these individual guys do down the stretch here. But you said it, Sherrod, it could be anyone short of Tatum, and I really believe that. I don't think Brad will want to part with Jaylen here. I don't think that's going to be their first thought. And I don't see it happening this summer. I think you're going to look at Drew and some other different scenarios there first, obviously, because I think as long as you have Brown and Tatum, you're going to be able to at least make the playoffs and at least have the foundation of being competitive there. And then you just try to build out around it. I think that's Brad's mindset. And so everyone's asking, will there be a directive put on Brad, to cut the cost here, to do what it takes, and whatever it takes, you have to do, because the money's coming down no matter what here. And he talked about that in Phoenix, what he's heard from this new ownership, what he's been told he'll have to do here.
Never really gave my 2 cents because that's not my role. It's their job, it's their right and everything else to sell the team and make that, make the decision they make. My only thing is just continuing to ask to be kept in the loop on anything I need to know from the standpoint of making decisions here and now and moving forward. So, as we get to spend more time with Bill, get to spend more time with Wiki and Bill, then we'll have more clarity on kind of, how we, are going to do things. But I really, every indication is it's pretty much business as usual. And so I'm excited about that. But, again, you spend a lot of money on these things. And so you have every right to come in and put your stamp on it however you want. And so I'm looking forward to working with it.
So not a ton there, but interesting in that I don't think he knows. I don't think he knows where this is going.
No. And I think, he's preparing himself for a shift and pivot, but knowing that, they haven't come in and directly said, this is what's got to happen, Brad. You got to do this, this, and this. That hasn't happened. But Brad, listen, and I think Brad, it kind of, jokingly referred to, but, they invested a lot of money in this. So they have the right to make that shift, that pivot. And I think Brad probably has some ideas of what he will do when that conversation has to come up, where they're like, Brad, we need to get this payroll in order. I would be very surprised if Drew Holiday is on his team next year. I'd be shocked, to be honest, because to me, that's the one position where, as good as he is and as much as he makes you a better team, there are scenarios where you could see not having him around and still being one of the top teams in the NBA.
Will there be a market for Drew, though? Given the contract, given the year he had, that's the question.
That's the challenge of finding someone who not necessarily wants Drew, but wants Drew at the price that he'll come at. That's going to be tricky. But if you're a team that is, let's say you have a good playoff run and, you lose in the second round or the conference finals because you don't have really strong wing play, or you're looking for that one, defensive perimeter player that can knock down corner threes or something like that, you might want to make a deal and add him, because he can certainly give you something in that regard. But there's just so many unknowns at this point for the Celtics going forward. And, and I think the focus right now, and it's clear, is just winning another championship. You do that this year, and I think everyone at that point will be okay with whatever decisions are made, because you gave it a couple years, you won a couple championships, you've got new ownership. We all know things have a tendency to change. Some things for the better, some things not so much.
Yeah, and I think the chat saying it, there'll be someone who wants Drew. It's just, what does it look like? How much money are you saving? What are you taking back in those deals? There's a lot of moving parts here. And then you start to think, too, Al Horford's a free agent. Luke Kornet's a free agent again this summer. Like, those are two guys who have been pivotal to your front court this year. And then Porzingis is obviously making $30 million on expiring. So, like, you're trying to figure out the future of your center position. Pritchard's rise, I think, makes that Holiday decision that feels almost inevitable at this point a little bit easier, a little bit more palatable, given how he clearly looks like he's ascending toward having a larger role here. And then White's locked up long term, and I think alongside Tatum, probably the safest guy, and Brown, of course, too, going into the future here. But I only asked the question, Sherrod, to Dwayne the other day, and even just asking the question made a lot of people mad. So I don't want to go down that road here, but I will address what I said the other day on the podcast. And it was just the idea that Jaylen, Durant, that conversation we've had a couple times now,
Oh,
could
Bobby.
become a conversation again this summer. That's all I said. I didn't advocate for it. I'm a no. I would not do that, Sherrod. But I'm just saying, given the
Yeah.
money they both make, given that Durant's probably out the door there in Phoenix, and that you're probably going to save money long term on that, it's a conversation at the very least.
Well, I think it's a conversation that certainly if I'm the Phoenix Suns, I want to have. I absolutely want to have that conversation. It's a conversation that if you're Brad Stevens, you will take that call and you'll have that conversation, but you'll make it clear, I think, early on that you're not really interested in doing that. And so then it becomes a matter of kind of going down the pecking order of the Boston Celtics roster. Who might you be interested in parting ways with?
So that's where it got a little convoluted, where they're like, I saw some people talking online like, oh, could you dump Drew's salary and dump Porzingis's and get below the second apron and then trade some guy? Like, that's not going to happen. So if you want Durant, and I think this, we had this conversation, 2 years ago, Sherrod, and I was all for it at the time. And looking back on it, I was wrong. And I think, given that it was reported that they were talking Brown, White, first, you look at what White became after that deal didn't happen, they would have been wrong to have done that too. If that actually was something that they were willing to do at that time, because Brown ascended into a finals MVP, White became, one of the more important players on the team. And so I was excited about it at that time just because of where Durant was in his career. But now he's 2 years older. Now, he's part of this dumpster fire in Phoenix, even though he's playing well and putting up good numbers there. And he's pushing 38. So that's where the conversation probably ends.
Yeah. I just don't think that there's enough capital on that Suns roster, even if you didn't have the second apron, factor involved, to make the Celtics get a deal done. Because it's hard to imagine a deal that they could structure involving Kevin Durant doesn't involve a Jaylen Brown and or Derek White heading back in return. And the point that you made, Bobby, I think is really the one that should make anyone who's thinking about this pause, and that is his age. He's a phenomenal player for someone who's been in the league as long as he has, but at some point, there's going to be a noticeable, undeniable drop-off in his game. And the thing I worry about with a guy like Kevin Durant is that it won't be a gradual drop-off. It'll just go from him being, future Hall of Famer, still able to get you 25 and 6 and 5 a game, to a guy that just can't make shots, can't defend, can't do anything other than just
defense has slid so much.
Yeah. The defense slips to the point where it doesn't, his offense isn't good enough to compensate for what you're not getting defensively. So no, I don't see them coming up with a solution that would make sense for both Boston and Phoenix. And because of that, I just don't see the Jays party ways anytime soon. Certainly not if in a deal involving Kevin Durant.
Noa Dalzell is joining us in just a second here from Phoenix, and Sherrod's going to take off. And before you go, Sherrod, I want to get your thoughts on this because this was a big news item today, or yes, I can't even think of the days with how late we're up here on the show. Damian Lillard, blood clot. I believe the same condition Victor Wembanyama came down with earlier this season that ended his year. They're keeping the door open to a potential return here, according to the reports, but obviously, again, a scary situation for him and a devastating development for a Milwaukee team that's really fighting to stay above water in the middle of the East there. And this obviously isn't going to help them down the stretch here. And with a loss tonight, I think they actually fell to 6th in the East, potentially lining up with the Knicks round 1. And if they were to win that series, Boston round 2.
Yeah. First and foremost, just wishing Damian Lillard a speedy recovery. I mean, these things are, this is not like a sore ankle or something that's, a relatively minor injury. This is one that, has, big time potential implication. Doesn't appear to be, it's that type of blood clot related issue, but any type of blood clot is something that you definitely have to kind of pause and get a handle on before you can move on. So from the basketball standpoint, this is a major blow for Milwaukee because he and Giannis are one of, if not the highest scoring duo in the NBA. And when you have guys who can score at the rate that they can, when you cut that in half, it's hard to win games, let alone compete. So they're gonna feel this. There's no doubt about that. But the one thing that they do have working for them in theory is it doesn't appear as though this is going to be something that's going to keep him out of the playoffs. And the Knicks may wind up with the team that they are watching now play for Milwaukee may be very different than the team they have to face in the playoffs. They may get a healthy Dame Lillard, and who'll be well rested as well, pairing up with Giannis, and that series may be the series that could potentially send the Knicks home much sooner than they thought. And because again, we don't know how well Lillard is going to be able to bounce back from this, and if he's able to play at the level that we know he's capable of, Milwaukee's going to be a tough out,
Yeah, I'd be worried about this if I was them. And obviously, again, the health there, first and foremost, they got to get that right because this is obviously a very dangerous condition. So I have my doubts about whether we'll see him. But again, they're keeping the door open there. And obviously, it's been a challenging season or two for Milwaukee there. But when Giannis is available in the playoffs, and he hasn't been since that 2022 series against Boston there, they're dangerous. And now with this and the loss tonight, and there only being 9-10 games left, they're starting to slide into being a possible second-round opponent for Boston there. But we're going to let Sherrod go. Appreciate him staying up late with us tonight here. The professor, working day and night here on CLNS Media. And we'll welcome in Noa Dalzell from out there in Phoenix. Welcome in, Noah. We've pretty much hit on everything at this point. But obviously want to circle back on the Tatum stuff because you were able to be there at the shoot around and see him warming up before the game and hearing from Joe about his status here. I think just from my perspective, the fact that they upgraded him to questionable and that it seemed like he made a real push to play in this game, a good sign. A good sign that he could be back as soon as Saturday. But what do you feel like the timeline might be at this point?
Yeah, definitely. It's good news from Tatum in Phoenix. He didn't play today. He went through a normal shoot around, it seemed. Doesn't have any brace on his ankle, doesn't have any visible swelling, didn't seem to be limited at all. Went through his pregame stuff. So I don't know. He seems like he's in good shape. Obviously, there's no reason for him to play 2 days after spraining his ankle. But Brad Stevens was in the locker room when that happened, and he said that Tatum went into the locker room and right away it was good news. Like right away when they looked at his ankle, it was good news. And so I think this was one of those things where he got scared in the moment and he was in a lot of pain and it looked worse than it actually was. And we were having conversations around, is this going to impact him in the playoffs? I don't think this is going to be more than a couple game thing at worst.
That's big. And we also have a big development here in the bracket that we're talking about here. And your horse in the race, Noah, is in a battle right now. And we'll throw it back to it.
I said this the other day.
Tatum wins, I'm quitting the show.
Okay.
People would ask. I was complaining about the Noah hates Tatum thing because Jimmy texted me before the game that he told NBC to put Noah hates Tatum on my nameplate, which I was like, knowing Jimmy, maybe that's true. I don't even know.
And you know what? I stand by it. So if you guys want me off the show, feel free to keep.
Okay.
Yeah, I stand by it. So.
Wow, you're sticking with it.
Yeah, I'm sticking with it. So I'll have an early summer vacation. So you guys can keep voting for it.
Machine.
Is Ahmed rigging it? What does that mean?
Are you rigging it, Ahmed? It's looking like it's Noah hates Tatum on Twitter, but the chat's what really matters here.
It's fine. Listen,
50-50.
I'll go to bed an hour earlier every night. It's fine.
I think it's gonna win. You're setting it up. Although people want to see you on the show, I think. So I don't know.
So maybe they can take my concerns a little bit more seriously. Ahmed promised shirts. Okay, he's not getting any of you shirts. Don't fall for it.
I'm still waiting on a Cornet shirt. I hope that's a bit above that in line. I think Noah hates Tatum's gonna get through round 1, unfortunately over
What is it up
lackadaisical,
against
which
right
I
now?
really like.
I don't
Lackadaisical.
even know what lackadaisical mean. Is that we were saying it wrong or something?
That was Jimmy trying to say it, of course.
Okay.
So that's
Well,
a tough first round. Who are they up against in the second round? Noah hates Tatum. Tatum lullaby. So we might have an all. I mean, it's
no,
gonna
but
get
if
through that.
Amit's rigging it, then I have no chance. It's just I stand by what I said.
And you're
I wasn't
muted, beat
speaking out
it.
of impulse.
I
No,
think it's gonna make the final.
it's
So
not
now it's
actually
just-
funny. It's just clearly like it's rigged now. So
I mean, I gotta figure out what it
whatever.
means, as do you. But
Yeah, I still don't get it. But
so anyway, good news on Tatum. I think we all felt that way when it moved to questionable there, and we saw him, leaping around and doing the high knees at shooter. I can't believe it though, because again, we were sitting here, Noah, talking about him maybe missing the rest of the regular season when that happened the other night, and it's such a scary visual. Maybe just shock of the moment or the flash of pain or whatever, but it just looks so serious. And like you said, Brad goes in there and they take a good look at it. And obviously we heard he was eating and had his shoes on and all of that night, but that ended up being a predictor of what was to come, and that it just wasn't that serious. And I guess when you look back on it and see the turn and, talking to some doctors and stuff who took a look at it, it was just a very normal turn. Like there wasn't anything overly concerning about what we saw in the moment other than the reaction. And I'm still, because he usually just pops right back up and even keeps playing or, just doesn't seem fazed by stuff like that when it happens. So for him to be down for so long and for him to walk off the floor and not return that night was definitely scary.
yeah, honestly, I think he got scared, and everybody's experienced that before. Everybody's like overreacted to an injury, thinking it was going to be worse than it is. We haven't heard from him since the injury, but if I had to guess, that's what it was, is that he, in that moment, thought to himself, like, I might have actually really screwed up my ankle, and got scared that it was a multiple-month ankle sprain. And then usually within a few minutes, you can actually discern whether or not it's really bad, even within like a minute, right? Because when you get up, you can feel it.
From your experience?
From my experience, that's the case. I mean, I've overreacted to ankle sprains a million times where I thought I was screwed, and then you get up and you realize you're actually not in that bad of condition. So I think that's probably what it was. He'll probably tell us in his own words what he experienced when he does speak to the media, but totally not a concern for Celtics fans. I think everybody should move on from this thing. It's either he'll miss another game or 2 games. Or 3 games. We'll see. I don't see a world.
That's the thing. I'm so glad he didn't play tonight. Obviously, he didn't have to, given what we saw. But that would have just been crazy to me. Even if he's fine, even if it wasn't.
It would have just been like, why tonight? Like, maybe because he likes playing against Kevin Durant, but there's no reason for him to.
They're playing them next Friday. I don't know. Someone talked him into it or pulled him out or just induce some sanity here. And when he was ruled out, I think everyone was thrilled because it was just like, please don't play.
And what was funny, so he takes the court for pregame warmups. He's like, he's in the last lot, when Peyton Pritchard usually goes last, he's with him. And then Pritchard's done with his pregame warmup and he just keeps going. He's still working with like Ross and some of the other player development coaches. He's just getting shots up, like really like intense pregame warmup. And there was like a kids dance group that was waiting to take the floor. And he didn't want to be done. Like he kept going. And then finally they took the floor and he kept shooting like in the corner. And they're fully using the entire length of the court for basketball. So he was like, you had to kind of drag him off the court for pregame today. You could tell he really wanted to play and he was probably pretty close to playing. And so that's why I think most likely he'll play on Saturday. That gives him 3 more days. Not that it's a big game.
You had the 2 off days. So
yeah, you got the 2 off days. I think they're staying in Phoenix. They're probably just going to hang out, golf, whatever. But yeah, totally not an issue anymore. I think I'm kind of laughing when I think back about how we responded on the show after the game. We were all like freaking out.
It was scary.
Yeah, because we were all looking at his face. And I think we've all covered him and watched him play, and we haven't really seen him react like that. So, yeah, things have definitely developed here. When I saw him walking to shoot around with his sneakers, I was like, okay, so this is good news. So.
What else did you see in the locker room after this one? And obviously a pretty ho-hum win and the worst defensive resistance I think I've ever seen against them.
Oh my God. First few minutes were quite literally stunning. Like I couldn't believe what I was watching. I don't know if it looked better or worse on TV, but just being
it
here,
was bad.
It was ridiculous. And then it didn't help that like Jaylen, who's one of their less efficient 3-point shooters, hit his first 2 threes. But I think the general thing, I will say, a little bit of concern lingers for me around Jaylen's knee. I thought he obviously looked a lot better tonight, had a good game. But he said post game that this is not going to go away. This is something he's going to have to manage the rest of the season, and that he's never, ever had knee issues before. And so it's bothering him, and it's something that's unusual. And I don't know exactly why he's playing versus resting, but I'm not in those conversations. I don't think it's worth overly speculating, but the reality is this is going to be a factor in the postseason. Is that I don't think he's at 100%. I don't know that he's going to be at 100%. I asked him straight up, like, how this experience has been mentally. And he said, I'm not, and my body doesn't feel 100% right now. And he's just not a guy that's really been the case for in the past.
Yeah, and we've had the conversation a million times where you're like, why can't you sit out for an extended period and get right? And I get the answer is that it's not going to get right, but it can't hurt to hold out for a little bit where there's no stakes, where there's nothing on the line besides the All-NBA eligibility here. And I don't think it can hurt. And again, you got the rhythm thing and the ramp up and the conditioning and all that, but you had that stretch of 4 out of 5. You come back the first game not really looking super involved or ready to go. And then tonight, I thought it clicked, and I didn't see any limitations from him. I love the dunk. That was a real moment where I'm like, all right, there's some burst back, there's some explosion back there. So, that's troubling to hear for sure, that it might be on again, off again. Like, he looked fine tonight. I don't know how you saw him play and if you saw anything that would seem to be limiting him in this one, but this looked like Jaylen in this game. And obviously on Monday, it looked like the hampered, limited Jaylen.
Yeah, I thought he looked good. On Monday, to me, it was less about hampered, limited. It was more about out of rhythm. He mentioned, I asked him about the mental aspect. He said there's like a question about confidence and mental confidence and just feeling like yourself. So I think that's what we were seeing. He is on a minutes restriction. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I guess I expected him to sound a little bit more positive about it after the game.
He said he's on a minutes restriction?
Yeah, either that he was or is. Yeah, he said he is on a minutes restriction. Let me actually find the exact quote so I don't get it wrong.
Yeah, I just don't get why he's out there. If you're on a restriction, if you're dealing with this and trying to get it right, and I just don't understand this stuff, I guess. And it's obviously a bummer to hear that it could impact him going into the playoffs even there, because the only thing that can hurt this team is health. And I think the thinking has to be over the last 9 games here is just get everybody as ready as you can for the playoffs. And we were kicking it around, and it's a tough call. He's probably right in the range of, that last All-NBA spot, and he's probably on the outside looking in right now. So he can really push hard and try to get that if that's what the thinking is here down the stretch. And I don't begrudge him that if he's able to play and it's not dangerous. But you really do have to balance, if you're him, I think, that and the rhythm and the things that are important to him and the reason that he's pushing to get out there every given night, with the potential benefits of just taking it easy down the stretch a little bit here. Because you will have practice to ramp up that first week going into the play-in. You will have games down the stretch that you can come into and play extended minutes in to try to work toward that. Like, you don't have to play every game down the stretch here. And fortunately, even with the All-NBA stuff, and now there's 9 games left, he can still miss 2. And beyond that, have 2 where he only plays 15 minutes. So I'm imagining a scenario where those last 2 against the Hornets, he just plays for 15 minutes and bangs out of those games. But he might actually have to put up some stats here down the stretch and have some great performances, probably even above what we saw tonight, to be able to actually win that race for the final, or maybe final 2 All-NBA spots there. Now that Lillard's out of the mix here, it appears, with the blood clot that he's dealing with there. So I haven't done a deep dive on whether he could actually get in this thing, but when he's 2 games off from missing it because of the game's eligibility, I know, like, you can't project that onto him, and say that that's the reason he's really pushing to get out there. But it's such a thing hanging over here that if he does miss 4 games, he's completely ineligible for it. So it's a tough situation. And it's obviously the downside to this rule too here, that if you are on the edge about playing late in the schedule, you kind of have to push. You mentioned the Halliburton situation. You kind of just have to push through it to get it.
Yeah, and obviously that was a pretty obvious one where it didn't make sense from a basketball standpoint, and there was no secret about what he was doing. Everybody knew it. I don't know that this is necessarily the case here. Again, I feel like there's a possibility that it's an all-NBA thing, but also like he is a couple weeks away from the playoffs. He wants to be in good rhythm. Like the confidence thing is real. Like he hasn't been playing well. He wants to start shooting better. Like I kind of do buy that as a real reason for why he'd be wanting to push through here. Nobody wants to sit out for a few weeks and then have the postseason start. And he's such a rhythm player. I mean, he's up there with as rhythm of a player, as much of a rhythm player as anybody else that we know in this league. And so whether, whatever else it is, I don't know if it's the all-NBA thing. Maybe it's a mix of both. Maybe it's really more one than the other. But I don't think they'd be putting him out there if it was specifically going to make things worse. At the end of the day, like, yes, these guys can be, headstrong about what they want to do, about whether they want to play. But if it's irresponsible, the medical staff is gonna put up a stink about it. And I don't think that's not the feeling that I'm getting, that he should absolutely be sitting. And it is worth saying, like Drew Holiday said this earlier in the year, but it doesn't always solve all your problems.
Yeah, that was my question. I think
I
I
don't
asked
think
White too.
We don't know what this is. We don't understand it really. If it's a bone bruise, I don't know why it would be something that he wouldn't think would get better. But I think we have to just accept the fact that we don't know all the details here. And at the end of the day, I have trust. They have a really good medical staff. They have guys who have been durable on this team. He's been durable in his career. Like, I think if it was just completely irresponsible, he would be resting right now. And on the injury front, I'll also just add, don't know exactly what happened to Derek White's hand. I'm sure you guys saw on the broadcast, he was kind of fidgeting with it. It was his right hand, right thumb. He did have a big ice pack on it in the locker room post game. He didn't talk to the media, but
right hand or left hand?
His right hand.
Not great.
So I don't know. I mean, he kept playing in the fourth. Ever since the Drew Holiday mouth finger that we all missed in real time, I'm like looking out for finger injuries everywhere. So it's probably not a big deal, but just noting as we discuss injuries, that's something that did seem to get jammed up tonight. It could have just been a jam. Doesn't necessarily have to be anything, but just I did when I came into the locker room, I did kind of look to see if he had anything on there, and he did have he was also sitting in ice, so he had ice in both of his legs, which is the norm for him. But there was an extra ice pack on his right hand.
So they have it, the injury updates. Unfortunately, too many that you don't want to see late in the schedule here.
A lot of small updates, but also looking around the league, and I know you guys talked about Damian Lillard. In the scheme of things, you would take the Celtics' health over most teams right now. So many teams have had season-ending injuries to their star players, so this is part of the game. I think they have a big runway here. They have room for error. So, yeah.
We're going to have an update on the bracket here in just a minute, but we'll keep rolling along. Obviously, that's tough news to hear that this could linger into the playoffs for Brown here. But, to that point with White, he had the foot sprain. Again, I think that was a significant factor in his struggles mid-season, and he pushed right through it, missed one game, and really struggled in the aftermath of that, and then eventually turned it around and got back to where he's dominating here. And this whole team, too, you see Jaylen do this through it. You see Porzingis come back from the illness and just keep breaking the world with his performances here, and 30 points in 3 quarters. Just out of this world from him in this game, too. And they're just rolling right now. I think this is, 7 straight now. Doesn't matter that Tatum's out. Doesn't matter who's out on any given night. Obviously, I was like, oh, geez, seeing Hauser back on there, but he's back out there hitting shots again after the off night. So they're in a really good place right now. And, the most important thing here with some of these bumps and bruises or guys not playing well, or, different guys having the opportunities on different nights, they just find a way to make it work with the lineups. They find a way to make it work with the combinations, or who's running things, or who has the ball and all of that. And there's almost, we've talked about it a little bit, like if a guy's out, it just almost puts everything into place a little bit more. And you're actually asking more questions if everybody's there than when someone's out, or, a couple guys are out here, because it just makes it so clear where things are going. And obviously that was the case for Jaylen in this one with Jason out. them being able to make it work, them going to deeper lineups. They went back to double big tonight, which obviously meant a little less Shireman here in this one, but they just have so many options right now. And they're back in that place, and it didn't feel that way earlier in the year, but they're back in that place where it's like Tatum's out, they're still going to win. Brown's out, they're still going to win. And I mean, they might actually run the table here the way that they're playing right now. And even through rest, they're going to be up against a bunch of teams here that are either hurt or their season's over and all that. So I guess I'll give them like one loss the rest of the way here, because it's a little improbable to think that they're just going to win every game the rest of the way. But that's what it actually kind of looks like could happen right now.
Yeah, they're playing really good. I was thinking about how, there was moments in January, December where they were telling us everything. We're going to peak at the right time. Like, we're going to get through the stretch. And it was kind of like, they seem to really believe it, but they definitely are struggling a little bit here. And you're seeing that now. You're seeing that basketball being played. It's really fun to watch when they're down a few guys, because like you said, the ball is just moving. It seems like there's finally enough shots to go around considering the talent on this team. And yeah, I agree with you on the fact where almost it feels like when everybody's there, it's a little bit stickier of like, how do you navigate that offense? That being said, that's a regular season problem. That's that you're playing a bad Phoenix Suns team problem. I think in a playoff series with the way teams scheme and the way teams strategize, and you're not going to see a team guard the Celtics like the way Phoenix did tonight. In those situations, you're going to want everybody. I think things change so much in the postseason. So it does make you realize that thinking about next year, and again, I don't want to keep bringing this up because I think it's the most boring topic of discussion to have in March, but like, as they're probably going to have to lose some players, like there is a margin of error for this team where they could lose a key player. And I think that they are still one of the best teams in basketball. Obviously you don't want that, but I think that's something I've just been thinking about over the stretch, where you can just tell that there's just so much talent on this team, almost too much talent. And that doesn't mean they're going to win the championship, because it comes down to a lot of other things, but that's how it feels sometimes, especially when they're playing bad teams, which has been often.
We touched on it briefly. What did you make of Brad's reaction to the sale and everything going on around there right now? The clip we played, it sounded like they're still trying to figure out what the implications will be there. And he almost seemed open to the fact that this ownership might have some directives for him that he's going to have to deal with and structure the team with going forward.
I didn't take anything too much from that, honestly. Like, he spoke with us for about 7 or 8 minutes, and I think he said a lot of the things that you would expect him to say, that, Bill seemed like a nice guy and good vibes, and Kimberly was nice and all that. And obviously he said, right now it feels like business as usual. It doesn't feel like there's any dramatic change. But he also opened the door on the fact that, like, when you buy a team and when you spend that money, like, you might want to put your stamp on things. And that over the next period of time, as he spends more time with Bill and more time with Wick, he'll get a better sense of things. One thing that stood out to me, and I think this is maybe less interesting to fans, but like, I asked him about if this has been like nerve-wracking for him, like how that experience has been. And he said that the first thing that he's been thinking about is just all the people that work for the organization. Like, there are 60 people that work in basketball operations. And so I think as we're talking to somebody like Brad, like, obviously everybody's thinking about the second apron and like if there's going to be a massive trade, but there's also like the real life implication of like everybody that we hear from and everybody that we talk to and everybody that we know in the organization, like, they're all kind of wondering, like, what is this?
I think that's telling too. Yeah, you just see someone new come in, or again, and this is the problem right now. And with the report today that we discussed, the Axios one, it's that you have Bill, he's the face of this, right? He's the Celtics fan, he wants to win, but there's so many different groups and different people with their money into this thing, and it's just going to become such a complicated mesh of stakeholders in this thing that, Bill might have the final say, or I guess Wick does because he's in charge technically, but like, you got this 6th Street thing and you got all this private equity money, you got this and that, where the decisions that get made here might be above anybody even that we're talking about. And that's where I think you start to worry a little bit, is like, all right, who's actually going to have the final call on some of the decisions, some of the limitations of money and the business factors that are going to drive this thing into the future here. And so I know Brad didn't say much there, but what I think he conveyed is that things could change here. Like, I think that's where I think even the fan base is getting to that point, Noah, where they're like, ooh, things are going to change probably sooner than we even think.
I think the reality is we literally just don't know anything. And that's how I felt leaving Brad's presser, is that he doesn't really know, and that I didn't take anything too substantive from what he said, because we just don't know at this point. So I think, it's, people like to have answers, but it's going to be one of those things where we just get more information in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and we'll see how they sort this out, because obviously the report today is that under the NBA rules, the way this thing's structured right now, it doesn't look like it should be able to go through, but the NBA could turn a blind eye to that, or they could restructure this thing a little bit, bring in some more money. So this thing just keeps getting weirder by the day to me, and we'll see where it ends up settling. But obviously a big thing hanging over the future of this team. The present looks great, and they have a great opportunity here, and they rolled today. Only other thing, though, a little less Baylor Shireman than we'd seen recently, at least in the normal rotation minutes of this game. It felt like they wanted to play bigger tonight. It felt like they wanted to play a little bit of a tighter rotation. So he ends up getting squeezed a little bit there, comes in the fourth and does some good stuff, including the 3 and the alley-oop pass. So he's keeping that momentum going here, but this was the first night where they actually reeled in his minutes a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think it was indicative of anything. Joe said pregame that Baylor has become one of those guys that just is an energy guy for them, and he's been that. And I thought that even in the 12 minutes that he played, he showcased some really fun stuff. He had that one Rajon Rondo-esque play that he actually quote tweeted somebody's video up, and he said, "Shout out to Rajon Rondo," and that's what I thought in the moment. So he continues to encourage.
I love seeing it.
Yeah, he continues to encourage me even when the opportunities are more limited and the stats don't jump out. Like, if you're really watching him carefully, we're seeing a lot of good stuff from him.
Are you starting to dream playoff minutes?
I don't know. I don't know that that's like the goal right now. I'm thinking more like this is going to be a legit player for a long time in the NBA. So that's where I'm not thinking more in the short term, because I think there's still a learning curve to understanding just schematically things, and the pressure is just so high and the margin of error is so limited. But yeah, encouraging.
That's where I'm at too. But the more they use them, the more they include them night to night. I mean, you mentioned it. Like, this might be a matchup thing. It could be Walsh, it could be Shireman, it could be different guys going back and forth. I guess it still could be, but we're 5-6 games into this being Shireman above Craig, Shireman above Walsh, Shireman even above Kata, and playing smaller and not having Kata in the mix on shorthanded nights. So I am keeping an eye on where this is building toward, because he's building some real momentum here. I said, you have that great night against Brooklyn, keep stacking them up, and he's kept stacking them up, and I think that's significant.
For sure. Yeah, he's building off of it, and it's really not just the scoring. Like, I actually don't think that the scoring is really the big part here at all. It's everything else. Am I frozen?
I think you're fading on us, but we're getting to the end of the show here. I do want to update the bracket, because we have winners across the board, and Noah Hates Tatum did advance, unsurprisingly, against Tatum Lullaby. I have a feeling Noah Hates Tatum's going to advance out of that one again. No one likes the Tatum Lullaby. So bad news for people who want Noah on the show long term. You're muted against Toothpaste
Apparently
Sandwich.
most of them don't, which is totally fine. I'll go to bed an hour earlier every night. So
you're muted going against Toothpaste Sandwich. I actually like you're muted there, because it's just, again, like Jimmy said, such a constant presence on the show here, unfortunately. Vegan Brownies Blame Pie. Which do you prefer, Noah?
I don't care. I'm over this bracket.
If Tatum wins, I'm quitting the show.
Okay. I think Blame Pie is going to
Amit's having a little too much fun with this.
Damn it, Amit's going to have to beat Noah Hates Tatum. That's what it's going to come down to here. But Luke's 20 million. I mean, Luke could knock.
I'll bring the result. It's fine. I'm going to enjoy my vacation. We'll see how the next bracket goes. You guys have one more round.
Results aren't finalized either. This is an unofficial result from round one. And
I don't even like that this is a thing that's on a poll on Twitter. Like, not everybody watches the Garden Report. Other people are just seeing.
Oh, this is in the chat.
No, this was on Twitter.
This is in the chat too.
But it was also a poll on Twitter. So I'm saying
Yeah.
I don't like that that's something that's on Twitter where people that don't know what the joke is and they don't know. Well, I don't even know what the joke is either, but it just looks weird that one of the Celtics reporters, that's a thing that's people can vote on. So
most of the results are coming from the chat, but again,
it doesn't matter. The
unofficial.
tweet's out there. So
Take that up with Ahmed. That's not for me. But it did win.
I'm taking it up with the
I
chat.
can't
The
deny
chat
that.
that voted for it to advance.
Yeah, you're right. It's gonna keep appearing round by round here. So we better figure out what it means, because I don't know either. I don't remember what it means, but it's there.
Well, as long
I guess
as it
people
doesn't
don't want
win,
you on the
we're
show.
fine. So
If
we got a
Noah
couple
hates
more
Tatum
rounds.
wins, I'm quitting the show.
Ahmed, shut up.
If Noah hates Tatum wins, I'm quitting the show.
Okay. So there you have it. Decide if you want Noah on the show or
late
not. I
for
guess
the
that's what we're actually
defense.
voting on.
Okay, that's what the vote is. So
She's Noa Dalzell. She is heading to San Antonio. So we'll have her coverage from there. Coming your way on the Garden Report after the game on Saturday. I think that's an 8 o'clock start. So the late night shows are done. We held it down for an hour and a half tonight. Thanks to Sherrod for starting it off with us here tonight. And for all of you joining us here, shout out to our sponsors. Game Time again. If you're in San Antonio or Memphis on Monday, I think I'm going to be making my way down to Memphis for that one myself. Use the Game Time app, CLNS, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply, and check out Prize Picks right now with a ton of basketball going on, hockey and baseball starting tomorrow. Great day to go check out Alex Bregman and Rafael Devers, who's going to be playing DH, and all the great Red Sox players who are actually giving me a little bit of hope this year. I'm feeling pretty good about them and the performances they'll be putting out there. You pick more, you pick less, and you are off with Prize Picks. CLNS, use that code over there to play $5 and get $50 instantly. And the Celtics rolled through the Suns. This was easy. This was really embarrassing for Phoenix, how easy this was for Boston in this one, especially without Tatum. And even better news, Tatum looks like he's on the verge of a return already, which is unfathomable after what we were talking about the other day. So that's that. That's our show. Thanks, Noah. We'll talk to you soon. And thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Bobby Manning. Celtics beat the Suns by 30. Good night.
If Noah hates Tatum wins, I'm quitting the show.
Okay.
I don't.
Yeah.
No one's sneaking a vegan brownie by me, I'll tell you that.
okay, you know what, John? We're gonna do it.
You have to feel that way too, Bobby.
I have to
Same.
feel that
Same
way.
to you.
Let's slide Al over and make Luke.
I mean, we gave you Luke hour early. We're not going to end this on a damn conversation about Luke